Have you ever noticed a door where there shouldn't be one? Most people walk past, brush it off, and never think twice. But what if you stopped? What if curiosity got the better of you, and you opened it? That's exactly what happened to Claire the night she checked into the Ashford Inn. A hallway that was never supposed to exist, a room not on any floor plan, and a door with a number no one admitted was there. The moment she stepped inside, the world she thought she knew began to unravel, and she realized some rooms don't want you to leave. Part 1. The invitation. The letter had arrived in a plain white envelope. No return address, no sender. Claire almost tossed it away with the rest of her junk mail. But the handwriting on the front, elegant, almost antique, made her pause. It read simply, an invitation to the grand reopening of the Ashford Inn. Claire blinked. The Ashford Inn was a name she hadn't heard in years. It was one of those local legends from her childhood, whispered about by kids in hushed tones. A once thriving country inn on the edge of town, closed abruptly in the late 1970s after a string of mysterious disappearances. Parents called it unsafe, condemned. Teenagers called it haunted. And now, apparently, it was reopening. She unfolded the thick, cream-colored paper inside. The invitation was brief. The Ashford Inn welcomes you back. Guests are invited to attend our exclusive reopening weekend. One night only. Limited rooms available. There was no RSVP, no contact information, just a date, tonight. Claire drove there out of sheer curiosity. Maybe it was nostalgia. Maybe it was her love for forgotten places, but something pulled her toward the inn as the sun began to sink behind the trees. The building stood just off an overgrown road, its windows glowing faintly with light. At first glance, it looked ordinary, like 100 other roadside inns with peeling paint and ivy crawling up the sides. But the closer she got, the more wrong it felt. The inn seemed larger than she remembered. Its roof lines stretched too long, its windows uneven, like the structure itself had been altered over the years. When she parked, there were only 3 other cars in the lot, though she could hear faint murmurs inside. The lobby smelled faintly of dust and lavender polish. An old-fashioned chandelier hung overhead, swaying ever so slightly though there was no draft. Behind the counter stood the innkeeper, a man in his late 50s with neatly combed hair and a polite but distant smile. "Welcome to the Ashford Inn," he said warmly. Checking in, Claire hesitated. "Yes, I received an invitation." His smile never faltered. "Of course you did. We've been expecting you." Something about the way he said it, "We've been expecting you," sent a small shiver through her. She signed her name in the guest book, noticing there were only a few names written above hers. None looked recent. "Room 5A, the innkeeper said, sliding an old brass key across the counter. "Up the main stairs, second on your left." Claire took the key, but as she turned, something caught her eye. A hallway extended beyond the lobby, longer than it should have been. She knew the Ashford Inn's basic layout from old photos online. A central staircase, 2 short hallways, maybe 6 rooms per floor. But this corridor, it seemed to stretch on endlessly, fading into dim light bulbs that buzzed faintly. She frowned. Does that wing lead to more rooms? The innkeeper's smile stiffened. "That part of the inn is closed, miss. For your safety, please don't wander." Of course, that warning only made Claire more curious. After dropping her bag in room 5A, she stepped quietly back into the hallway. The carpet muffled her footsteps as she crept toward the forbidden wing. The light dimmed the farther she went, the air cooler, heavier. The walls here looked different. Older wallpaper, peeling in long strips, as though untouched by renovation. It was as if this section had been frozen in time, while the rest of the inn had been polished up for guests. Halfway down the hall, she stopped. There was a door. Its number plate read, 6B. Claire frowned, whispering aloud, "That doesn't make sense. The Ashford Inn never had a 6B. Rooms ended at 6A. She was sure of it. Even the floor plan she had seen online showed no such door. She reached out and brushed her fingers over the tarnished brass numbers. The metal was cold, colder than the air around it. Her pulse quickened. The innkeeper had said this wing was closed. But here it was, a door with a number no one admitted existed. And then, click, the knob turned on its own. The door creaked inward, opening into darkness. Claire's breath caught in her throat as the smell of old dust and something faintly metallic drifted out. She shouldn't step inside. She knew that. But curiosity, as always, was stronger than fear. She leaned forward, peering into the shadows of a room that shouldn't exist. Just before she could take a step inside, a faint whisper drifted from the darkness, soft, almost playful. Finally. Part 2. The room's first secret. The whisper clung to the air long after it faded, as though the walls themselves had spoken. Claire froze in the doorway, heart pounding. She could still turn back, walk down the hallway, and pretend she never saw this door. But she didn't. Her hand tightened around the knob, and she pushed the door wider. Hinges groaned in protest, and the stale air inside drifted out in a suffocating wave. The room was larger than she expected. Dust floated in the beam of her phone's flashlight, settling over heavy curtains, a cracked mirror above a dresser, and an armchair slouched in the corner like it hadn't been moved in decades. She stepped inside. The carpet crunched underfoot, brittle with age. The walls were lined with faded floral wallpaper, the pattern barely visible beneath years of grime. And in the far corner, half hidden by shadows, sat an old leather suitcase. Claire crouched beside it. The case was scuffed, its handle frayed, the initials RM stamped faintly into the leather. She tugged at the clasp. It popped open with a metallic snap. Inside were neatly folded clothes, pressed slacks, a collared shirt, the kind of style people wore decades ago. Beneath them, she found a yellowed envelope. Her breath caught. The envelope was addressed to Ashford Inn, Room 6B. But Room 6B didn't exist. On the desk sat a small, leather-bound diary. Its cover was cracked, but when she lifted it, the pages held together. She flipped to the back, her fingers trembling, where the last entry was dated, August 14th, 1979. 46 years ago. The writing was rushed, frantic. The door shouldn't have been here. But I opened it anyway. Tom doesn't feel right. I hear voices at night. If anyone finds this, don't stay here. The room doesn't let you leave. Claire's stomach tightened. The words felt less like a warning and more like a confession scratched down in desperation. She ran her hand over the final page and noticed something else. The lines didn't end with the handwriting. They ended with a smear of dark, rusty brown. Dry blood. The silence around her deepened. The end on the other side of the door seemed distant now, muffled, as if she had stepped into a sealed-off pocket of space. Her phone buzzed once in her hand, screen flickering before the battery icon suddenly dropped from 72 to 14. "What the hell?" she muttered. That's when she heard it again. Her name. So faint, she almost convinced herself she imagined it. Claire. Her light darted toward the wardrobe in the corner. Its door was slightly ajar, a thin line of blackness splitting the wood. Every muscle in her body screamed to leave. But her legs carried her forward anyway, inching toward it. The wardrobe loomed taller the closer she got, its surface carved with faint scratches, like fingernail marks. Claire reached out. Her fingers brushed the door. It creaked open, inch by inch. Her flashlight beam swept inside, illuminating only empty space. Dust, a hanging coat, and nothing more. She exhaled shakily, forcing a laugh. Jesus, Claire, you're scaring yourself. But the relief was short-lived, because when she turned away from the wardrobe, the suitcase was closed again. Claire stumbled back, heart hammering. She hadn't touched it. She knew she hadn't touched it, and yet the clasps were shut tight, as if it had never been opened. She spun toward the door. Enough. She was leaving, but when she reached for the knob, the hallway beyond looked different. Darker, longer, and faintly, under the hum of her own ragged breathing, came footsteps. Slow, heavy, measured. Someone was walking in the hall outside. She held her breath, frozen. The steps stopped right outside the door. For a moment, silence. Then, with an almost delicate knock, 3 sharp raps on the wood. Claire's voice cracked. "Who's there?" No answer. She leaned closer, ear pressed to the door. That's when she realized the sound wasn't coming from outside the door. It was coming from inside the wardrobe. The wardrobe door burst open with a slam, her flashlight flickering wildly, and for just a split second, she saw a pale hand reach out of the darkness. Part 3. Time doesn't work here. The wardrobe door slammed against the wall with such force that Claire stumbled backward, crashing into the desk. Her flashlight skittered across the floor, rolling in a dizzying beam of white. For the briefest second, she'd seen it. Thin fingers, pale as bone, curling out of the dark interior. But now, when the light steadied again, the wardrobe stood empty. No hand, no movement, nothing but the hollow echo of her own frantic breathing. "Get it together, Claire," she whispered to herself. "You're just tired, seeing things." But she didn't believe it. Not for a second. The air in room 6B felt heavier now, pressing against her chest, making each breath a conscious effort. Her phone buzzed weakly in her pocket. She pulled it out, to battery. Just moments ago, it had been nearly full. And then she noticed something else. The clock on the desk. A small brass alarm clock, its face cracked, its second hand ticking erratically. Tick, 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 pause. Tick, tick, pause. Not steady. Not right. She lifted it, and, as she did, a wave of dizziness washed over her. She blinked. The room looked the same, dust, cracked wallpaper, suitcase in the corner, but her phone now read 3:47 a.m. She had only been in here minutes. Hadn't she? A sound pulled her to the window. She shoved aside the heavy curtains, coughing as dust billowed into the air. Her eyes widened. The parking lot was gone. So were the trees lining the road. In their place stretched an endless forest, tall, black silhouettes swaying against a gray, moonless sky. This isn't possible. Then wasn't in the middle of a forest. She had driven up a paved road. She had seen other cars. She backed away from the window, heart thudding. And then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Right outside the door again. This time, the knob turned. Claire froze, every muscle locked. The door creaked open just an inch, enough to let in a thin blade of shadowy light. And through that sliver, she saw him. A man in a brown suit, hair slicked back, his features blurred by the dim glow of the hallway. He looked like someone plucked straight from an old photograph. Her relief caught in her throat. Maybe he could help. Maybe, hello, she whispered. The man turned his head toward her voice. But instead of answering, he stepped past the doorframe and vanished. Gone, as if he had never been there. Claire's pulse pounded in her ears. She turned back to the desk and froze again. The diary. It was open now, pages rustling faintly, though she hadn't touched it. She leaned over, squinting at the spidery handwriting. A new entry had been added beneath the last dated one. Fresh ink, still glistening. Her breath caught. The room is hungry. It shows you things to keep you inside. It has taken others. Tonight it takes her too. Below the words, her name was scrawled in large, shaky letters, Claire. Her legs nearly gave out. No, 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 no. She slammed the diary shut, but it didn't matter. The words were burned into her brain. The walls seemed to close in. She grabbed the door, yanked it wide, and stepped into the hall. But the hallway wasn't the same one she'd entered from. It stretched longer, darker, the ceiling lights flickering at intervals. Doors lined both sides, but their numbers made no sense. 3A, 11C, 9F, all jumbled impossible. The carpet squished faintly under her feet, damp in places. Hello, she called, her voice trembling. Is anyone here? Her voice didn't echo. It was swallowed, like the walls themselves absorbed it. She started walking, her hand brushing the wall for balance. Every few steps, she glanced back, only to find the hallway behind her shifting, stretching, as though she had gone nowhere. Her breath quickened. Then wasn't just old. It wasn't abandoned. It was wrong. She stopped at a door, slightly ajar. A faint glow pulsed from inside. Hesitant, she pushed it open. The room beyond looked almost normal. A bed neatly made, suitcase at the foot, lamp still glowing. Dust hadn't touched it. On a nightstand sat a wallet. She picked it up. Inside was a driver's license. Michael Harris, age 32, issued 1992. Claire froze. The name sparked a memory. She had read about Michael Harris. He'd vanished in 1992 after checking into a roadside in outside town. An unsolved case. Her stomach turned cold. She dropped the wallet, stumbling back. And that's when she heard the voices. Soft at first. Whispering. Multiplying. Male, female, young, old. All overlapping. You shouldn't have opened the door. You shouldn't have come here. You shouldn't. The whispers rose to a hiss, filling the room, circling her. Claire clamped her hands over her ears, squeezing her eyes shut. When she opened them again, she was standing in front of room 6B. The same door. The same brass numbers. As if she had never left. Her knees went weak. She staggered backward. And then, her phone buzzed in her pocket, screen lighting up with a single notification. New diary entry added. Her heart seized. Slowly, with shaking hands, she pulled the phone out. The screen showed the diary app, one she never opened, one she never wrote in. The newest entry glowed at the top. She's trying to leave. She won't. Claire dropped the phone in horror, and as it clattered to the floor, the glowing text shifted, letter by letter, forming one final line. Part 4. The room won't let go. The words on the screen burned into Claire's mind. She's reading this now. Her phone buzzed again, screen flickering before dying completely. The room fell silent, but the silence wasn't empty. It was charged, waiting like something was holding its breath. Claire snatched the phone off the floor and shoved it into her pocket. Her only thought was escape. She reached for the door, room 6B's cursed brass handle, and yanked. The hallway beyond stretched out in both directions, endless and dim. She ran. Carpet blurred beneath her feet, walls lined with doors that multiplied, repeating, 6B, 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 each one identical to the last. She tried slamming them open as she passed. Every single door led into the same room. Peeling wallpaper, cracked mirror, the suitcase in the corner. It wasn't a hallway at all. It was a loop. Her lungs burned as she stumbled to a stop, leaning against the wall. No, this isn't real. This can't be real. But the air pressed in heavier, suffocating. The buzzing of the hallway lights grew louder, almost electrical, until it felt like the sound was drilling into her skull. Then, out of the corner of her eye, movement. A figure at the far end of the corridor. It was her. Claire stared, breath hitching. The figure stood perfectly still, silhouetted by the weak light. Same hair, same posture. And though the distance was too great for details, she knew, the figure was smiling. Her double lifted one hand in a slow, deliberate wave. Panic jolted Claire into motion. She darted into the nearest room, another 6B, and slammed the door. Her chest heaved, sweat prickling at her skin. The room was darker than before. Shadows pooled unnaturally in the corners, too deep for a flashlight to penetrate. The diary still lay on the desk. Only now, it was open to the center, its pages flipping wildly as though caught in a storm that didn't exist. She stepped closer, unable to stop herself. The writing appeared in real time, ink bleeding across the paper. She ran. She hid. She thinks she can leave. Her throat went dry. She snapped the book shut, but when she looked up, the mirror above the dresser caught her reflection. Except it wasn't a reflection. Her mirrored self lagged behind, movements delayed. While Claire clutched the diary to her chest, the reflection only just reached for it. And then, her reflection looked up and grinned. Claire stumbled back. Oh my God! The glass spiderwebbed with cracks as the reflection slammed its fist against the other side. The lights flickered violently. Claire bolted for the door again, wrenching it open. This time, the hallway wasn't empty. Figures lined it. Men in outdated suits. Women in dresses decades old. Children holding faded toys. All standing outside their doors, their faces pale, their eyes black pits. Every one of them turned to look at her in unison. And then, together, they whispered, "Stay." The whisper wasn't sound. It was inside her head, rattling her skull, pushing her back into the room. She clutched the doorknob, fighting the urge to obey, and slammed the door shut. Her thoughts spun wildly. She needed another way out. The window. She yanked the curtains open. But outside, there was no forest now. No parking lot. Just an endless hallway of doors stretching into blackness. Her stomach lurched. She staggered back, gagging at the impossible sight. The suitcase in the corner snapped open on its own. Clothes spilled out, scattering across the floor. A wallet tumbled free, then a watch, then a ring. Each one belonged to someone different, then hadn't been closed for renovations. It had been feeding. Claire's legs shook. Her mind screamed at her to stop looking, but she couldn't. She recognized the last item that slid free of the suitcase. It was her own phone, the one still in her pocket. She grabbed it, pulled it out. Her screen cracked dead, but it was the same device. Two versions of it, both real, both impossible. Her vision swam. She couldn't breathe. She had to get out. The diary rustled again. Against her better judgment, her eyes flicked to the open page. The ink was already waiting for her. There's only one exit. Her voice cracked. Where? Where is it? As if in answer, the door to the room swung open, revealing the hallway once more. At the far end, lit by a single buzzing bulb, was the inn's front door. She could see the outline of it. The brass handle, the frosted glass window. Her salvation. Without thinking, Claire sprinted. Her shoes pounded the carpet, her breath tearing from her lungs. The figures in the hallway didn't move this time. They simply watched as she raced past them, silent and expressionless. The door grew closer. Her hand stretched toward the knob. She could already imagine the rush of night air, the gravel under her feet, freedom. But as her fingers touched the brass handle, she froze. Through the glass, she saw herself. Another Claire, standing on the other side, watching her with hollow eyes. And this version of herself wasn't reaching for the door. She was holding it shut. The other Claire leaned close to the glass, her lips moving in a whisper Claire couldn't hear, until the words formed in fog across the pane itself. You can't leave. Not yet. Part 5. The final twist. Claire's breath fogged the glass as she stared at her own face on the other side of the door. It wasn't just a reflection. It was her, every detail perfect, down to the cut on her palm from when she'd fallen earlier. But this version's eyes were wrong. Hollow. Empty. And her mouth was curved into a smile Claire didn't recognize as her own. The other Claire leaned closer until her lips brushed the glass. White mist bloomed across the surface, forming words that appeared one by one in frost. You can't leave. Not yet. Claire yanked on the handle with all her strength. The brass burned cold against her skin. The door didn't move. Her double only pressed harder, pinning it shut. No, Clyde whispered. No, no, no. She pounded on the glass. Let me out. Her double tilted her head, then mouthed something slowly, deliberately. Claire could read the words. I'm already out. The world tilted. Her knees buckled. If that was true, then who was she? The hallway behind her groaned, with stretching and creaking like the building itself was alive. Doors rattled in unison. The figures she'd seen earlier, the pale men, the women, the children, they stepped forward now, filling the hall, closing in, all whispering one word, stay, stay, stay. Claire spun, pressing her back to the door. Her pulse hammered so hard she thought her chest might split open. The diary on the desk flipped open violently, pages whipping until it stopped on the very last sheet. New ink crawled across the paper, writing itself in jagged strokes. The room always chooses one to stay. Another takes her place. Claire's stomach twisted. She shook her head. No, not me. I won't. But the reflection in the glass was still smiling, calm, patient. The air shifted. Heavy. Final. The figures in the hall stopped whispering. They parted slowly, forming a path straight back to room 6B. The door at the end stood wide open, blackness yawning inside. It wanted her back. No, Claire whispered, her voice shaking. I'm not going back in there. But her legs betrayed her. Step by step, she was pulled forward, not by force but by inevitability. As if her body already knew the outcome her mind refused to accept. The closer she got, the louder the room became. Not with sound, but with a deep vibration in her bones. A hum, low and endless, like the drone of something ancient and alive. Inside the doorway, the suitcase waited. Open. Empty. The diary sat on the desk, pen poised over the page as if waiting for her hand. The mirror was cracked wide open, her reflection smiling through the jagged web of glass. This time, the reflection spoke out loud, its voice an echo of her own, but deeper, hollow. It's your turn. Claire screamed and lunged for the doorframe, trying to resist, but the shadows inside wrapped around her wrists and ankles, pulling. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her was her double stepping calmly out into the hallway, brushing past the pale figures, smiling as though nothing had ever been wrong. Silence fell. The door to room 6B clicked shut. The brass numbers gleamed faintly, as if freshly polished. Hours later, or maybe decades, time meant nothing here. The innkeeper walked the hallway with his usual measured steps. He paused outside the door, resting one hand on the knob. His face was calm, unreadable, but his eyes flicked to the door's tarnished brass plate. Room 6B. He sighed softly, almost regretfully. Then he turned, heading back toward the lobby. Another guest had checked in. Another name would never be spoken again. In room 6B, the diary lay open on the desk. The ink on the final page had dried. One last entry, written in frantic, jagged strokes. If you find this, don't open the door. It isn't a room. It's a trap. And now it's me. The entry was signed, shakily, Claire. As the camera lingers on the diary, a faint whisper fills the silence. Her voice, but distorted, layered with dozens of others. If you see a door that shouldn't exist, don't open it. And then, just before the screen cuts to black, the sound of a doorknob turning.